you try to find something common with the other person. That's the basics of communication. So whenever, I mean, it doesn't matter if you don't really speak the words very well. I mean, if you don't speak the language or if you don't speak English very well, it doesn't really matter. As long as you make an effort to find a common ground, that's what matters. I mean, that's what I did when I first started learning English. I mean, I didn't really speak English as much as I can as of now, but then, when I started learning English, I loved my English teachers. And I just started asking them all sorts of questions. They were some of them are Americans, because I went to this Hagwon when I was in primary school, but I didn't speak the full sentence. So I just threw all the words that I knew, and then I just started making conversation through the few words or phrases that I could speak of. But then, through that sort of flow of words, I could, make a common ground. That's the basics of the communication. So for you guys as well, try to make I don't know how to, I think the best English words that you can actually describe this feeling is empathy. It's like making connection. So if you can speak any kind of words that you can make an empathy or you can sort of make a sense of connection, that's the starting line. And also, greeting is the most basic form of communication, and greetings are just so important. So if you live abroad, try to see or observe what kind of greetings people actually do, because different contexts, different cultures have different types of greetings. So in Cambodia, Japan, how do you greet?
In our language.
Yeah.
Mean if you want to meet others, you say "Jumriapso."
Jumriapso?
Yeah. If you just with friends or someone that same age, or just say "Susway."
Susway.
Yeah.
So do you actually shake your hands, or how do you do the body language like this?
Yeah.
Oh, it's like Thailand. It's like in Thailand.
Yeah.
Yeah. So if you don't know the expression, you just do this. So try to imitate. And if you live in America, making eye contact is really important. So that little observation about how people actually greet, that can actually help you to communicate very well. And even in Korea, how do Koreans greet to each other? We don't really greet. How do we greet? We are very formal, right? We bow, so we don't tend to make eye contact very well, but just look how people greet and try to do it. So I went to this high school which was very formal, but then they really emphasized the greetings. So whenever you meet a stranger, any new person into the school, you always greet them, even though you don't really know them well. And because that really shows that you are respectful, you are actually showing your interest. So greetings is very, very important. All right, who's next?
The multifaceted nature of communication.
Multifaceted.
Nature of communication. Human communication has ancient origin as evident in cave paintings in prehistoric Europe.
How do you pronounce this in French?
I'm not sure.
Lascaux?
Indigenous paintings in Australia.
Indigenous. Lasso? Alright, okay. Sorry. Yeah, reading.
Throughout history, various means of communication have been utilized, including paintings, use of human messengers for official information. Advances in information technology have transformed communication media and the roles of communicators. Revolution from paint, telephone, radio, telegraph to modern technologies like the internet, social media, Facebook, Twitter, and blogs have expanded communication beyond temporal, spatial, cultural, and national boundaries.
Right, so a lot of people actually think these days communication actually involves advanced technologies, but if you think about it, murals and the old paintings inside, caves, they are the basic forms, very basic forms of communication among the people in the prehistoric time. So, paintings can be a good way to communicate. Letters, this morning we were actually talking about whether romantic relationship is possible to start. I mean, possible to form online. You know, because I thought it was impossible to actually have a romantic relationship starting from the online space. But there are some cases that, you know, like actually people meet up each other online and then, you know, they've been dating and then they actually get married. So there are successful case studies about the romantic relationships like forming online. So there's an evolution of relationships and communications according to the development of the technological, you know, stuff. But the basic forms of education, I mean, not education, but the communications have been, you know, the paintings, images, or like simple letters. Because like in the past, even like 200 years ago, most of the exchanges between the lovers were done in letters, you know, and that's why we have a lot of English literature based on the letters. All right, so components of communication. So we're gonna be a bit more theoretical from now on. So we're just gonna see what are the components of communication. Who's next? Okay, Jian.
Components of communication. 8 simultaneous components of human communication: source, message, channel, receiver, encoding, decoding, noise, and feedback.
Yeah, and we're gonna delve into D, what those words mean in terms of communication. Could you read on?
Sender, the person who initiates the communication by creating a message to be conveyed to the receiver.
Right.
Message, the information or idea that the sender wishes to communicate to the receiver.
Right.
Encoding, the process of translating the message into a format that can be conveyed to the receiver, such as words, symbols, or gestures.
Right.
Channel, the medium through which the message is transmitted, such as spoken language, written text, or visual cues. Decoding, the process of interpreting the message by the receiver and understanding its meaning.
Right.
Receiver, the person who receives the message and interprets it.
Right.
Feedback, the response or reaction of the receiver to the message, which is conveyed back to the sender.
Right.
Noise, any interference or disruption that can affect the transmission or reception of the message, such as physical distractions, language barriers, or technical difficulties.
Right, so these are the components that the communication scholars have identified, like 8 basic components of the communication. So we have the sender, who actually sends out the message, right? But then, in order to send out the message, what does the sender have to do? I mean, I'm actually sending my message to you right now. So I'm actually, there's a message in abstract form. It's a thought, right? It's in my brain. But what I'm doing now is I'm actually encoding it to the sound, right? If I were to just show the PPT, then I'm actually encoding my message into a visual cue, into PPTs, in image. But when I'm actually talking, when I'm actually speaking and trying to deliver the message to you, I'm encoding my message into a spoken word. You know, that's what it means by encoding. So you have this abstract form of thoughts, you know, and then you're trying to translate it as to word or image, you know, so that this message can be delivered to the others. So we have a sender and the message, and the sender basically encodes the message into the spoken word, you know, or other images, and it transmits to the receiver through a channel, you know. So actually this classroom is kind of like a channel, because I'm actually sending you a message in this context, right? So, or if I were to communicate with you with a Facebook, then Facebook becomes a channel. What else? I mean, we have a lot of channels these days, you know, like we have emails and we have like Face Talk, we have phones, so we have various channels of communication nowadays, a lot more advanced than before. I think that's the biggest improvement that human beings have recently. And then through this channel, message is conveyed to the receiver. And what does the receiver do? So she's hearing you guys are hearing my words, right? And I can bet you guys are actually thinking all different types of thinking after receiving my message. You know, so I'm telling you like all this kind of stuff, and then maybe Andrea is like talking, I mean, like thinking about her experiences in France, you know, like, because I asked her about the French word, and you know, Bang, I asked him about the how people greet. So, you know, people have all this like different stuffs going on in their brain, right? And that's how the receiver interprets the message. It's called decoding. So decoding equals interpretation. You know, how you actually receive the sounds or the images, and you actually convert it into abstract form in the brain, okay? And but then when the message is being transmitted through a channel, we can have a noise, you know. Oh, we're very silent, I mean, we're very quiet now, so we don't really have much interference now. But, you know, like in the morning, we have this strange sound coming from outside, so it can be a noise. And, you know, a lot of times, if you're to study in the cafe, or if you're communicating in the cafe, there's a lot of noise, right? So there's a noise, and then what else? We're missing. So when they say source, this equals the sender, all right? Receiver, oh, and then the important part is feedback. So whenever the sender transmits the message through the encoding to the receiver, you know, the receiver actually has to give the sender a feedback. Okay, so these are the 8 basic components of the communication. Okay, so there are various theories of communication, but I'm just like, I'll explain only the 3 models. So this is kind of like a linear model of communication. So as I said, I'm the source, I'm the sender, you know? So I start with my message in my brain, and then I somehow encode my message into a verbal or a spoken word, or into an image like the PPT, or and if I were to show you a video, then it's being encoded into a moving image, right? And then through this channel, I basically try to transmit the message to the receiver, to you guys, and then you guys actually, in order to receive, you actually have to interpret my message. So that means communication is a very subjective process, because you basically you are interpreting my message. So everyone has a different interpretation, right? No one has the same one, right? So that's why communication is inherently very subjective. Right, and then receiver, and then after you receive it, I mean, this is a quiet sort of classroom, it's just one way, you know, but then a lot of times, you know, when we're doing the role plays and discussions, it's actually 2 ways, or like multi-ways, and then you guys, you know, basically give the feedback. So because it works in one way, it's actually quite linear, and that's why it's called the linear model of communication. But we have a different model as well, and that's called interactive. And interactive means when we have like a context or the environmental factors coming in. So right now, I'm actually doing the lecture to you in this very quiet classroom. But what if we do the lectures in a field? You know, we just go to a park, you know, and then I started lecturing, you know, and that environment would be very different, right? And like say we do like yoga practices, right? And if you were to have a yoga practice inside a room that is quiet, and you know, you guys actually can focus very much on the instructor. But what if you have it in the park? I used to have yoga classes like a lot in the parks when I lived in Oxford, and with the breeze and with the birds chirping, and you know, with the sunlight, it just makes whole experience very multidimensional. So it's a lot better if you were to have the yoga exercise. It's a form of communication, like on the outside. So according to what kind of environments or the context that you have, it actually changes the whole like experiences. So that's why context is very important when you are actually trying to learn something. And there's actually a lot of educationalists emphasize. So, and there is a theory, educational theory. If you were to effectively learn something, then try to make as many different contexts of learning as possible. So suppose if you were to learn English, and try to have the classes like in various contexts. So you don't just, you know, like read books in one classroom or in your room. You actually through the chat, on the internet, you send emails, and you have a conversation at a cafe in English, and you talk with a chat GPT. So if you were to variate your context environments a lot more, then your learning or your intaking of information or your encoding of information in the message becomes a lot more diverse and a lot more enriching. So this is the caveat, of the interactive model of communication. And the third model is basically a transactional model of communication, and this emphasizes, in linear model, I was the sender, right? I was the source of information, and then it just goes to you, and then you are just a receiver. So it's just one way. But then, according to the transactional model, basically I am the sender or the source as well as the receiver. As much as you actually give me the feedback, and if it's very active and you're very participating a lot into the classroom, actually the sender and the receiver, they are interchangeable. And a lot of scholars say that if the sender and the receiver, they are interchangeable, the more frequent they become like interchangeable, then the more effective your communication becomes, right? So these are the three models. I mean, this is like a theories that a lot of like communication scholars have made up, and it's like a good framework for you to think about, But it really means, the more diverse sort of context or environments that you have when you're communicating, the more effective you become. And also try to think of yourself not only as a sender of message, but also the receiver. That means you have to give a lot of feedback. You have to be very attentive about what the receiver says, or how the receiver reacts, and try to actually modify or utilize the original message according to the feedback the receiver actually sends. Okay? All right, so the characteristics of communication. Whose turn is it? Okay, Connie.
Different elements of culture may change at varying speeds and times, while technology and material objects become more similar across cultures. Beliefs, values, and worldviews can be resistant to change. Even if the outer appearances of cultures become similar, the inner core, including beliefs and values, may still differ significantly.
Right.
For example, wearing traditional Indian attire does not necessarily indicate a shared set of beliefs and values within America.
Right.
Culture is ethnocentric.
Right.
Ethnocentrism is the belief that one's own culture is superior to others, and it is present in every culture according to anthropologists. Ethnocentrism creates barriers for intercultural communication by building fences between cultures.
Right.
How a culture is perceived influences interactions with people from that culture.
Right.
Culture is holistic. Culture is often analyzed by isolating its components for ease of description, but it functions as an integrated and complex whole.
Right.
Various parts of culture are interrelated, and the entirety of culture is more than the sum of its interconnected parts.
Right.
Culture is learned. Culture learning is a lifelong process, and individuals continually learn specific rules and norms governing behaviors within their communities. Cultural learning involves acquiring diverse practices such as dietary preferences, explanations for natural phenomena, and attributions of events of cultural beliefs. Communication plays a crucial role in cultural learning, occurring at both conscious and unconscious levels.
Right, so we have this model of communication, and then we have to actually combine with the concept of culture, because we're actually doing the intercultural or the global communications. So when we're to combine the components of culture with the components of communication, it actually becomes really dynamic. And this is something that I really appreciate about the intercultural learning or the communication. Because if you were to just focus on the culture itself, then it tends to be very ethnocentric, right? So if you're like Korean, then like you're from Korea, you've lived in Korea for all your life, and your thinking or the pattern of your thinking is fixated upon the culture, the ethnocentric sort of point of view of Koreanness, right? So that's why we try to not get rid of it, but then we're trying to sort of supplement it with the other perspective by actually learning about the perspectives or the values or the beliefs of the other culture system, right? And if you were to think of, like how can we actually get out of the ethnocentrism, which is so inherent in a lot of global conflict, a lot of global misunderstanding, it actually comes from that superiority complex. A lot of times it's complex, superiority, that we are the best people in the world. We have the best language in the world. If you were to actually get rid of it, then you basically have to learn from the other culture and learn from the people from the other cultures. And the awareness that this culture is very holistic and it's dynamic. It changes all the time, and you can actually change your cultural perspectives by engaging with a lot of people from different backgrounds, and that actually broadens your learning experiences, broadens your horizons and your perspectives. So this is very, very good perspective to learn. Okay, so and then we have different communication styles. So in this class, we're actually focusing on the different communication styles by actually looking into various styles that different people from different cultures have. Okay, who's next on that?
Communication styles. Communication styles refer to the different ways individuals communicate and express themselves.
Right.
Some common communication styles include assertive. An assertive communication style involves expressing oneself confidently and directly without aggression or passivity.
Right.
Aggressive. An aggressive communication style involves expressing oneself in a forceful or intimidating manner, often at the expense of others.
Right.
Passive. A passive communication style involves avoiding conflict and expressing oneself indirectly or vaguely, often leading to misunderstandings.
Right.
Passive-aggressive. A passive-aggressive communication style involves expressing oneself indirectly or through sarcasm with the intention of undermining or manipulating others.
Right. So there are different communication styles, and different cultures have different preferences towards different styles. But I wanted to distinguish between assertive style and aggressive style. They sound very similar, but they're very different. Assertive basically means confident. When you're speaking, you actually are very confident and very clear, like what I'm speaking now. So you're being very assertive. But then aggressive means you're actually threatening the people. So you can be actually quiet when you're speaking, but if you were to use very strong words, like in the morning class, we had a negotiation, the role play, and then one of the students employed this word, criminal, to describe a student. And that's a very aggressive choice of word, So I told her, you never use such a strong word in negotiating a very sensitive deal, because it actually threatens the other person or the people actually listening to you, and it actually negates the whole purpose of negotiation. So there's a big difference between being assertive and aggressive. And as you can see, you can be both passive and aggressive. You can be actually very indirect, and you can be quite quiet, when you're speaking, and that's what it means by passive. You're just listening, but then at the same time, you can be aggressive. So one of the things that I was really, I found it really surprising was when I first went to UK was their sarcasm. British people are very sarcastic. So when they were trying to say something negative, they don't actually say it directly. They actually try to make an indirect way to indicate that something is wrong, but they're doing it in a very sarcastic way. So you don't actually recognize it instantly, but then you somehow later are like, oh, that's what it meant. So British sarcasm is a classical example of passive aggressive. But I like it. I mean, afterwards, like after me and my husband like returned to Korea, we started like using the British sarcasm, to make fun of each other. Because if you're intimate enough, then you can actually use those expressions to, I don't know, to be more frank about each other. But I guess you have to be still quite sensitive and quite careful to utilize those words or expressions. All right, so what we're gonna do is to see what kind of communication styles different cultures or different nations employ. And I think it's very telling, so we're just gonna do this exercise, which is called the interculture classroom, okay? I'll just